Think about a time when you felt joy from being around the ones that you loved. What did that feel like for you? My favorite joy moment was marrying my dreamboat husband, Tyler, in the summer of 2013. There's really only one time when all the people you love will be in one room, your wedding and your funeral. And only one of them you actually get to enjoy, and I did. I remember the sounds of laughter of all of our family and friends in one room. I remember how my cheeks hurt from smiling so much. Joy was literally radiating from my body. Now think about a time when you felt lonely. What did that feel like for you? Maybe you had just lost somebody that you loved, or you were at a wedding with nobody to dance with. For me, I felt that depth of loneliness in the fall of 2007 when I moved to Bozeman from a small, close-knit community in northern Idaho where I couldn't get away with anything. Trust me, I tried. My community truly helped raise me, which is why I wanted to start a new life, one that I had built after college graduation. So I packed my silver Subaru Outback and I drove to Bozeman sight unseen, with no job and no community. And when I arrived in Bozeman, I was incredibly lonely. I remember one evening walking on Main Street and into the Poorhouse Bar. Friends and colleagues were drinking cheap beer and commiserating about their work week. And in that moment, I felt this very primal emotion that I wish I knew somebody here, and I wish somebody knew me here. And as the days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, my loneliness grew into a heavy sadness. My body was tired all the time. In fact, loneliness was starting to affect my health because in my loneliness, I wanted to fix something. I wanted to control something. So every day, I started to eat a little bit less and to exercise a little bit more. Without realizing it, I created a significant eating disorder. And now it's important to understand that during this time of chronic loneliness, I actually wasn't alone that often. I was usually surrounded by friends, coworkers, people at church. So while I wasn't socially isolated, I was feeling intensely lonely. Because there's a difference between social isolation and loneliness. Social isolation is the number of times that we come into contact with another person on any given day. For most of us, some social isolation is good and healthy. On Sundays, I crave solitude. It refills my bucket for the week. Loneliness, on the other hand, is the difference between the quality and the quantity of relationships that we have in our life and those that we wish we had. Which is why you will hear people say that they never felt more alone than when they were in their dysfunctional marriage. So while social isolation can cause loneliness, they are two different things. And for most of us, these emotions of joy and loneliness are fluid. They flow in and out of our lives like the river of life. It is normal to feel these emotions. In fact, it's what makes us human. But for other community members, they feel this sense of loneliness every single day. And while loneliness used to be thought of as just a sadness or something that people felt sometimes, medical professionals are starting to recognize loneliness as a full-blown health epidemic. Because from an evolutionary perspective, we're tribal creatures. We're meant to live in community for long-term survival. According to the leading researcher on loneliness, John Cacioppo, loneliness is actually a fight or flight response in our bodies. When we are hungry, our body tells us to eat. When we are thirsty, our body tells us to drink. And when we are in need of social interaction, we start to feel this negative emotion of loneliness. This is actually our body telling us that we can't stray too far from the herd that's protecting us. And while this alert system was used to prevent us from getting eaten by lions outside of our tribe, loneliness can still kill us. It's just a slower and more invisible process. Because when we don't deal with loneliness in a healthy way, it can actually have negative effects on our bodies. Loneliness can create physiological changes that actually accelerates the aging process. Lonely people are more than twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's as non-lonely people. Think about that. And studies have shown a strong connection between weakened social ties and suicide. As Dan had mentioned earlier, people, especially men, are more likely to kill themselves when they feel disconnected from society. And in today's social media age, wouldn't you assume that people are feeling more connected than ever? I mean, I have like 1 million friends on Facebook, so I'm not lonely, right? In 1980, 20% of Americans self-identified as lonely. And today, that number has doubled. And loneliness does not discriminate. It can affect us all. In fact, it's skyrocketing in youth ages 16 to 24. And experts are blaming social media. They're saying that it hinders the development of real-world social skills necessary to build meaningful relationships. Because when we connect face-to-face, we create deeper levels of intimacy and empathy. An emoji simply doesn't replace the real person laughing or crying in front of you. And as we spend more and more time online, we are losing these critical skills to have empathy and to listen in order to build meaningful relationships. So how do we do that? I offer you 4 words: show up and listen. In the fall of 2007, when I was in the depths of my loneliness and my eating disorder, my roommate at the time, Katie, knocked on my bedroom door. She sat down on my bed. She said, "Bridget, I love you, and I'm worried about you. I know what's going on, and I think that it's time that you talk to somebody." And then Katie listened. And in that moment, I told Katie all the deep, dark things that loneliness had caused in my life. And it felt so good to be listened to. The next day, I sought help from a mental health provider. And thankfully, I've never again struggled with that depth of loneliness or an eating disorder. But I will never forget how powerful it was when Katie had the bravery to simply show up and to listen to me. So today I challenge you to show up and to listen. Because when is the last time that someone deeply and actively listened to you? And how did that make you feel afterwards? For most of us, listening is simply a means to an end. We are waiting for somebody to finish their thoughts so we can interject ours. But my mom once told me that the greatest gift we can ever give another person is the ability to let them tell us their story. And she was right. For the past 4 years, I volunteered for a community program that focuses on showing up and listening to people in crisis. We are not trained counselors. We're simply neighbors showing up for neighbors going through a hard time. And each week, I start my conversations with my care receiver by saying, "Tell me about your week." And then I listen. And when she has finished her thoughts, I say 5 magic words that we can all use. Tell me more about that. And then I listen more. And that entire conversation is about her. It is not about me or a similar life struggle that I've had. And I don't provide advice because people don't want advice. They simply want to tell you their story. Because you see, when people are deeply listened to, we create meaningful connections that help people to realize that they are not alone. And that day that Katie had the bravery to show up and to listen to me, she saved my life. And every day, there are many groups in our community that are reaching out to people who feel lonely. Whether it be Meals on Wheels that's delivering a hot meal to an isolated neighbor, and more importantly, checking in on them. To Befrienders that partners a lonely elderly person with a younger person. To teen mentoring groups that are reaching out to isolated youth. To the Help Center that's providing critical mental health resources to people who feel alone every day. My experience with loneliness fuels my work at the Community Foundation. Every day I do my job in hopes that nobody will feel that sense of loneliness that I felt when I moved to town. And today I challenge you to think about one person in your life who might be struggling with chronic loneliness. How can you reach out to them in a meaningful way? It can be as simple as a phone call. Hi, I was driving by your house this week and I was thinking of you. How are you? Or maybe it's shoveling the walkway of a neighbor because you've seen newspapers piling up and so you knock on their door. Or for you introverts out there, it can be as simple as smiling at somebody and making eye contact. Who needs you this week? You never know, by simply showing up and listening, you could save a life. Thank you.